Our daughter was 11 weeks old when I found the first document. Not because I was looking for it, because I was looking for our car insurance renewal, and I opened the wrong drawer in the filing cabinet and the wrong folder inside it, and I pulled out a single page that had my name on it and then did not have my name on it. The company. The company we had built together for 6 years. The LLC we had filed jointly. The operating agreement we had both signed at a conference table in our attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was 7 months pregnant and tired and proud of what we had made. The document in my hand was an amended operating agreement, filed 8 months ago, while I was 36 weeks pregnant, and then 40 weeks pregnant, and then recovering from a delivery that had not gone the way we planned, and then not sleeping, and then barely functional in the specific way that the first months of a new baby make you barely functional. While I was all of those things, my husband had amended our operating agreement. His name? Managing member. Percentage ownership? 100%. My name? Nowhere. I stood at the filing cabinet for a long time. Our daughter was asleep in the next room. I could hear the specific breathing of a sleeping 11-week-old through the monitor on the counter. I closed the folder. I put it back exactly where I found it. I went to the kitchen and I made coffee I did not drink. Then I opened my laptop. I did not start with the company. I started with everything else. Because if he had done it once, he had done it more than once. I knew this the way you know something you do not want to know, completely and immediately, and without the option of unknowing it. I was right. 3 documents, 8 months, $340,000 of jointly built assets now registered in one name. His, not mine. My name is Laura Mitchell. I am 37 years old. I am a co-founder of a commercial interior design firm. Not was, am. That matters, and I will explain why. I started the firm with my husband Daniel 9 years ago. I was the designer. He was the business development. Neither of us had run a company before. We had complementary skills and shared ambition and the specific confidence of 2 people in their late 20s who believe that what they are building is going to work. It worked. Not immediately and not without difficulty, but it worked in the ways that matter. Clients who came back and referred others, a reputation that preceded us in the Houston commercial market, a firm that grew from 2 people at a kitchen table to 11 employees in an actual office with actual clients who paid actual invoices. We built it together, both of us. That is true, and it is the foundation of everything that comes after it. I also need to tell you something about what the 6 years of building looked like from the inside. Daniel was visible. He was the face, the client lunches, the industry events, the handshakes that turned into contracts. He was good at this, genuinely good. I was behind the glass. The proposals, the designs, the project management, the client satisfaction that turned 1 contract into 3. I was the reason clients came back. Both things were true. Both things were necessary. Both our names were on the LLC. Until they weren't. Our daughter Nora was born in September. The pregnancy had been difficult in the last trimester, not dangerously, but enough that I had stepped back from client-facing work in August and had been working primarily from home, managing projects remotely, trusting Daniel to handle the in-person pieces. I trusted him. I want to say that clearly because it is the context for everything that follows. I was not absent. I was not disengaged. I was growing a human and managing a business remotely, and trusting my husband and business partner to handle the parts I could not physically be present for. The amended operating agreement was filed in October. Nora was 3 weeks old. I know this because the filing date is on the document. I know I was 3 weeks postpartum because I know when my daughter was born. I know I had no knowledge of this filing because I was home with a 3-week-old and I was not checking business registration records. Nobody checks business registration records when they have a 3-week-old. That is not negligence. That is new parenthood. Daniel knew this. He filed in October. The second document was a property transfer. The office space we had purchased 18 months earlier, a small commercial unit in the Montrose neighborhood that we had bought jointly and that had appreciated significantly since purchase. Transferred to Daniel's name alone. Filed in November. Nora was 6 weeks old. The third document was a business bank account amendment. The primary signatory on our business accounts had been changed from both of us to Daniel alone. Filed in December. Nora was 10 weeks old. 3 documents, 8 months, $160,000 in company equity, $120,000 in property value, $60,000 in accessible business accounts, $340,000. Transferred. While I was pregnant, then recovering, then caring for our newborn daughter. He called it paperwork. I know this because that is what he said when I finally asked. If you have ever trusted someone with everything and found out what they did with that trust while you were not watching, you already know why this story exists. Subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be here every week. I did not ask Daniel immediately. I found the first document on a Tuesday. I did not ask until the following Tuesday. 7 days. Not because I was afraid. Because I am a professional, and because I had spent 6 years building a business, and I understood that the conversation I was about to have required preparation that was worth 7 days of silence. I called our original business attorney. Her name is Rebecca, and she had filed our original LLC, and both our names were on every document she had ever prepared for us. Rebecca said, "Laura, I need to tell you something. Daniel contacted my office 6 months ago to request the amendment documentation. I was not his attorney of record for this transaction. He used a different firm for the amended agreement. I was not informed." I said, "Did you know this had been filed?" Rebecca said, "I did not. I became aware of it when you called me this morning. Laura, do you want me to pull the full picture?" I said, "Yes." She called me back in 4 hours. The full picture confirmed what I had found and added one detail I had not yet located. A second bank account opened in Daniel's name alone in August, while I was on modified work schedule due to the pregnancy. The account had received 3 transfers from our joint business operating account, totaling $47,000. I wrote down the number. I added it to the spreadsheet. $387,000. Total. Then I called a family law attorney named Sandra who specialized in business asset division in divorce proceedings. I had her name from a colleague who had gone through something adjacent 2 years earlier. Sandra reviewed everything I sent her in 48 hours. Sandra said, "Laura, what he did is not legal. The operating agreement amendment required your signature as a 50% member. He cannot unilaterally amend it. The property transfer required your signature as a joint owner. He cannot transfer it alone. The account changes. Those are more complicated depending on how the account was originally structured." I said, "So the documents are invalid?" Sandra said, "The documents are challengeable. Whether they are definitively invalid depends on specifics we need to examine. What I can tell you is that you have a strong position, and that position gets stronger the faster you move." I said, "I have a 11-week-old. Sandra said, "I know. We'll work around her schedule." I said, "What do I do first?" Sandra said, "Freeze what you can freeze. Document everything. And do not tell him what you know until I tell you to." I did not tell Daniel what I knew. I made dinner every evening that week. I fed Nora and put her down and sat across from my husband at our kitchen table and talked about ordinary things: her sleep schedule, a project deadline, a client call he had taken. He did not know I had spent 7 days building a case. Sandra said I was ready on Tuesday morning. Daniel was working from home. Nora was napping. I came into his office, the room at the back of our house that he had converted from a guest room when we started the firm, and that still had the original whiteboard where we had mapped out our first year's projections. I sat down across from him. I placed 3 printed documents on the desk between us: the amended operating agreement, the property transfer, the bank account amendment. Daniel looked at the documents. He looked at me. I said, "I found these last Tuesday." He did not say anything immediately. His face moved through something. Not quite guilt, not quite surprise. The specific expression of someone who has been waiting for a conversation and has not decided yet which version of it to have. Daniel said, "Laura." I said, "I want you to explain them to me." Daniel said, "I was going to tell you." I said, "When?" He said, "When things were more stable, when you were past the hard part with Nora." I said, "The hard part with Nora has been 11 weeks. You filed the first document when she was 3 weeks old." He looked at the desk. I said, "Daniel, I am going to ask you one question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Was there a version of this where you were going to tell me and give me back what you transferred?" A long silence. Daniel said, "I needed to protect the business." I said, "From what?" He said, "From risk. If something happened, if your recovery had been complicated, if there were medical issues, I needed the business to be stable." I sat with that for a moment. That answer. He had constructed a version of this where he was protecting us, where the transfers were precautionary, where the concern was for the business and for Nora and for the stability of what we had built. He had constructed it carefully enough that I could see him believing it. I said, "Daniel, our operating agreement required my signature for any amendment. The property required both our signatures for transfer. You did not have my signatures because you did not ask for them. If you had been protecting us, you would have asked me." He said, "You were recovering." I said, "I was recovering from childbirth. I was not incapacitated. I was not legally incompetent. I was home with our daughter. You chose not to ask me because you knew I would say no." Silence. I said, "I want you to hear what I am telling you, not as an accusation, as a fact. You transferred $387,000 of jointly owned assets to your name alone while I was in the most vulnerable period of my life. And when I ask you why, you tell me it was paperwork." Daniel said, "I didn't say it was just paperwork." I said, "You did. You said those exact words to Rebecca when you asked for the amendment documentation. She told me." He looked at the whiteboard behind me. The one with the first year's projections, both our handwriting on it. Neither of us had erased it in 9 years. I placed a fourth document on the desk, Sandra's letter. I said, "My attorney prepared this. You have 72 hours to respond through your own counsel. I recommend you do so. If this moment stayed with you, leave me a comment. Has someone ever chosen the moment when you were most vulnerable to do something they knew you would have stopped? Tell me what happened. I read every single one." Daniel retained an attorney within 48 hours. The next 4 months were the most legally complex period of my professional life and the most personally painful. I want to describe them accurately rather than dramatically. The operating agreement amendment was invalidated. Rebecca filed the challenge within a week, and the legal basis was straightforward. A 50% member cannot be removed from an LLC without her consent and signature. The amended agreement Daniel had filed was not valid. The original agreement was restored. The property transfer took longer. The challenge required a court filing and a hearing. Daniel's attorney argued that the transfer had been a legitimate business decision made by the managing member. Our position was that the managing member designation in the amended agreement was itself invalid, and therefore any action taken under it was also invalid. The court agreed. The property was returned to joint ownership. The bank account situation was the most complicated. The business account had been structured in a way that allowed either partner to modify signatories. Daniel had used this to remove me. Sandra negotiated a restoration of joint signatory access and a full accounting of the transfers that had occurred during the 8 months. The $47,000 in transfers to a separate account was documented. In the divorce proceedings, because by month 3 it was clear that was where we were going, that documentation became part of the asset accounting. The divorce was finalized 7 months after the Tuesday conversation. The firm is still mine. Not ours. Mine. The settlement gave me full ownership of the firm in exchange for other assets. This was my choice. I had built the client relationships. I had developed the design reputation. I had 11 employees who had joined because of the work I produced. The firm was mine in every way that mattered before Daniel filed the first document, and it was mine in every legal way after the settlement was signed. Daniel has started another business. I know this through industry contacts. I do not think about it much. Nora is 18 months old now. She is curious and loud, and she pulls every book off the lowest shelf every morning and brings them to me one at a time as if she is presenting evidence. She has my determination. I see it every morning. I am very glad she does. I am 37 years old, and my husband transferred $387,000 of our jointly built assets to his name alone during the most vulnerable year of my life. The first thing, vulnerability is visible to the people around you, and not everyone responds to it the same way. I was pregnant, and then recovering, and then a new parent. I was not absent from our business. I was managing remotely. I was on calls. I was involved. But I was not checking business registration records or property title records or signatory changes on bank accounts. Daniel knew exactly what I was and was not monitoring. The timing of each filing tells you what he understood about my capacity to catch it. Know what is registered in your name. Know what is registered jointly. Set a calendar reminder, once a year, to check the registry of your state's business entities for your name and your jointly held business names. Check your county's property records for your address. Check the signatories on your business bank accounts. These checks take 30 minutes total. They take 30 minutes once a year. What they protect you from is not always a malicious spouse. Sometimes it is an administrative error. Sometimes it is a well-meaning partner who made a unilateral decision. The check is not about distrust. It is about awareness. The second thing is about the word paperwork. Daniel told Rebecca that the amendment was paperwork. He told me it was for stability, for protection, for Nora. He had two different explanations for the same set of documents depending on who was asking. When someone describes a significant financial or legal document as paperwork, as something routine, as something technical, as something that did not require your attention or involvement, that description is information. Not always bad information, but always worth examining. Ask what the document does. Ask why your signature was not required. Ask why you are hearing about it now rather than when it was filed. A person who made a legitimate decision will answer these questions directly. A person who made a decision they hoped you would not examine will answer them with more language. The amount of language is proportional to the size of the problem. The third thing is the hardest and the most personal. I spent 7 days building a case while making dinner and putting Nora to bed and sitting across from Daniel at our kitchen table and talking about her sleep schedule. People ask me how I did that, how I held both things at the same time, the love that had been present in our marriage and the knowledge of what he had done, without collapsing one into the other. The honest answer is that I did not hold them both at the same time. I held the case during the day, and I held the marriage in the evenings, and I kept them separate until Sandra told me I was ready. What I want you to know is that the case was not a betrayal of the marriage. The marriage had already been altered by what Daniel chose to do. I was not ending something by documenting what had happened. I was responding to an ending that had already been made by someone else's choice. The Tuesday conversation did not change what our marriage was. It just made visible what it had already become. Nora pulled 6 books off the shelf this morning and brought them to me one at a time. The last one was upside down, and she seemed entirely satisfied with this. I am building something for her. This time, just my name on the documents. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever chosen the moment when you were least able to catch them to do something they knew you would have stopped? And which moment stayed with you longer? Finding that first document in the wrong drawer, or watching Daniel look at the whiteboard during the Tuesday conversation? I read every single one. If this story reached you today, subscribe.